People who had someone try to offer intimate favors as payment for your work. How did that go? Story 1. So this happened about 6 years ago when I was working as a freelance mechanic. I was in my mid-20s, still building a client base, mostly doing word-of-mouth jobs out of my garage or driving out to people's homes. One day, a woman I'd never met messaged me. She said she got my number from a mutual friend. Her car wouldn't start and she couldn't afford a tow or a shop visit. I was used to helping people out, so I told her I'd come take a look. She lived about 30 minutes away, kind of in a more rural area. I got there, did the diagnostics, and it turned out her starter motor was completely dead. I had a spare on me, weird coincidence, so I told her I could swap it out right then and there. She looked kinda nervous and asked what it would cost. I said, normally a couple hundred, but since you're a friend of a friend, I said I'll just charge you for the part. She paused and said quietly, "What if I paid in a different way?" Now I'm not stupid. I knew what she meant, but I also didn't want to assume anything. Maybe she meant she'd cook me dinner or offer some kind of trade. So I played it safe and asked, "What do you mean by that?" She smiled, stepped a little closer and said, "You're cute, I'm single, you're helping me out. Seems like we could help each other." I won't get into all the details, but let's just say the starter wasn't the only thing that got fired up that day. It was all consensual, clear, and weirdly, kind of sweet. We stayed in touch for a bit after, but nothing serious came of it. Looking back, it felt less like a payment and more like an unplanned connection. But yeah, I guess technically I got paid with something other than money that day. Still, the strangest but most memorable car job I've ever done. Before we continue, do us a quick favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. Last week, I had just wrapped up a long day of work and decided to treat myself to a drink at a local bar. Nothing unusual, just me, some good music, and a strong cocktail. A couple of drinks in, I strike up a conversation with this guy who clearly has money, like Ferrari keys casually on the bar kind of money. We end up chatting for a while, and somewhere between drink 3 and I jokingly ask if I can take his car for a spin. To my surprise and possible regret, he laughs and says, "Sure, why not?" Now here's where it gets chaotic. I take the car out just to feel the engine, but I completely overestimated my ability to handle a supercar and my own sobriety. I hit a bump, panicked, and swerved right up onto the sidewalk. Story 3. For context, I 19 female work online, and my boyfriend 28 male works in abseiling, one of those high-risk, high-pay trades. He brings in a decent amount, while I make enough to cover rent, groceries, bills, and essentials, with maybe a couple hundred left over each month. Most of my subscriber base is from the coastal regions, and when the cyclone tore through, a lot of them understandably had to cancel. My income plummeted almost overnight. My boyfriend missed only a few days of work due to the weather, but I fell behind on rent fast. He stepped in and covered the next 2 months for me. No questions asked. Whenever he stayed over, he'd do all the chores without being asked. He really is that kind. But I hated relying on him so much. I wanted to turn things around myself, so I came up with a plan to expand my online business. I'd been toying with launching a premium content package, new branding, and better equipment to attract a broader audience. I was sure it would work. Problem was, I didn't have the money to invest, so I borrowed a few $1,000s from a friend, more than I was comfortable with, but I was desperate and confident it would pay off. Things were okay, until Cyclone Alfred hit. Just as I started rolling out the new content and trying to regain traction, the cyclone caused massive infrastructure damage. Power outages, internet blackouts, and general chaos meant my already struggling audience dropped off even more. No new subscribers, refunds being requested, and now on top of it all, I was in debt. The worst part, I had nothing to show for the investment. The equipment was fine, but the timing couldn't have been worse. I lost nearly everything I'd put in. And now I owed a friend a significant chunk of money I had no way of repaying anytime soon. Ashamed and panicking, I couldn't bring myself to ask my boyfriend for more help. He'd already done so much. I felt like a failure. So I made a choice I'm not proud of. I offered my friend, yes, the one I owed, the option of letting me repay some of the debt in a different way. I offered him that he can have me how he wants me instead of the cash I owe him. It was humiliating, and I justified it to myself by thinking at least it wasn't putting more burden on my boyfriend. My friend didn't say yes right away, but eventually accepted. I'm not sure what that makes me, resourceful or just desperate, probably both. I haven't told anyone. Not my boyfriend. Not anyone. I still don't know if I'll ever be able to. And the guilt eats at me every day, even as I try to pretend everything's normal. Story 4. For context, in my earlier years, I was a full-service working girl living in UK. Clients would come to my place and text me when they arrived. My building required a door code to get inside, and for privacy and safety reasons, I never gave that out. Instead, I'd go downstairs to let them in. No matter how ridiculous the hour. This happened a few years ago, and to this day, it's still my favorite story from those escapades. For appointments, I dressed fairly formally, just a little on the slutty side, but nothing too obvious to keep things discreet. One night, a client texted to say he'd arrived but was lost. It wasn't hard for me to spot a confused-looking man wandering around outside. How many lost men can there be at one apartment block? I called him to guide him to the door. I saw someone on the phone who looked the part. We made eye contact. Did the classic, "Oh, is that you?" hand gestures, and both hung up to greet each other in person. We small-talked our way inside, but as we went up to my flat, his conversation became unusually interested in the apartment. Now, I was used to clients making comments like, "nice place," or asking, "what's the rent on this?" So it didn't seem too odd at first. I led him through the hallway, past my roommate's room, and into mine. Once we were alone, I turned on the charm, getting a little flirty. But he kept asking questions: how many bedrooms, what the kitchen was like, how long I'd lived there. It seemed excessive, but I dealt with nervous clients before, so I brushed it off. I sat down on the bed and, as always, asked for the payment before anything happened, not even a kiss until the money was sorted. That's when his face froze in shock. A long, confused pause followed. And then it hit him. And me. He wasn't my client. I wasn't his estate agent. He muttered something and practically bolted out the door. I was mortified, but my roommate, who had overheard the whole exchange, was doubled over laughing. We both were, once the initial shock wore off. Poor guy, I have no idea if he ended up renting in the building, but I'm guessing probably not. Story 5. A few years back, I was 19 and broke in Vegas. Don't ask how I got there, young, dumb, full of energy, and no money left for a hotel or even a ride home. While wandering around looking pathetic, I met this girl. She was 21, had a hotel room, and was way more put together than me. We hit it off, started talking, and she offered me a drink back at her place. I didn't have anywhere else to go, and she seemed cool, so I went with her. One drink turned into many. The conversation turned flirty, and the next thing I knew, well, let's just say, sleep wasn't on the agenda for a long time. We ended up hooking up pretty much all night. It was like some chaotic energy loop. Every time I thought we were done, she'd start right back up like she hit a reset button. Pretty much banged until my nuts were shrunk into my body. Even then, she gave a try at giving me a blowy. It was crazy. Honestly, I think I passed out sometime around sunrise. The next day, I woke up in a real bed, not on the strip or in a stairwell somewhere. She ordered room service. We parted ways, and that was that. No numbers exchanged, no promises, just a wild night and a soft bed. So yeah, I guess I technically paid for a night's stay with my services. Story 6. So a while back, I had just started doing freelance electronics repair, mostly laptops and small devices. One of my first clients was this older guy who needed his laptop fixed. Power button was dead, and I told him I could replace it with a new part for about $40. He looked at me, kind of smirked, and said, "Shame you steer not into guys. I'd offer you a good gobby in exchange." I laughed it off, kept it professional, and told him I appreciated the offer, but I'd stick to cash. Later that night, I actually came up with a creative workaround that didn't even require a new part. Went back the next day, got it working perfectly, and didn't charge him for the fix since I didn't need to order anything. He was genuinely impressed, handed me a cold beer, and asked if I'd be at the local rodeo that weekend. Told him I had plans. Still one of the more memorable early jobs I've had. Honestly, it was kind of flattering in a weird way. Story 7. Back when I was working night shifts as a hotel receptionist, I had my fair share of odd requests, but one night definitely stood out. It was around 2 a.m. when this very intoxicated middle-aged guest came stumbling up to the front desk. She leaned in, gave me this exaggerated wink, and asked if I could bring her some room service, if you know what I mean. And not the kind with food trays and hotel menus, if you catch my drift. Now, I've dealt with a lot of strange things on night shift, but this was something else. I politely declined, told her I was just the guy who checks people in and resets Wi-Fi routers. Also, to be honest, she was completely out of it and not exactly my type, even if I was open to that sort of thing. She shrugged, laughed it off, and wandered back to her room. One of the many reasons I tell people, night shift at a hotel, never boring. Story 8. I used to work as an electrical apprentice, mostly installing air conditioning units in council housing. Since it was government-funded work, the tenants never actually paid us, so any extra offers definitely weren't about settling a bill. That said, I did get propositioned twice. The first time was from an older woman who, how do I put this politely, looked like Honey Boo Boo's mum. She made a few comments, leaned a bit too close, and hinted I could stick around after the job was done. I kept things polite, smiled, and got out of there as quickly as possible. The second time was more awkward than anything. Twin girls at another house were following me around while I worked, giggling, dropping flirty comments, and being pretty obvious about it. One even handed me her number as I packed up. Then I found out they were both still in high school, 16 years old. I was 19 or 20 at the time, so while it wasn't technically illegal here in NZ, it was a hard nope from me. Honestly, even if it had been a different situation, my confidence back then was non-existent. I had zero game, so nothing would have come of it anyway. Looking back, it's funny how close life can get to those movie cliches, just without the soundtrack or flattering lighting. No regrets. Story 9. I used to deliver pizzas, and one night I dropped one off at a house where a woman, clearly high on something, pretty sure it was meth, answered the door. She looked at me wide-eyed and kept saying, "Is it hot? I like it hot," really drawing out the word hot like it had 5 syllables. I just smiled awkwardly and said, "Yep, fresh out of the oven. That'll be $17.50. Instead of going for her wallet, she grabbed my arm and kept repeating, "I like it hot." At that point, I gently pulled away and started backing off with the pizza still in hand. Thankfully, another woman, much more coherent, rushed out with a 20, apologized profusely, and handed me the cash. I gave her the pizza, said, "Have a good night," and got out of there fast. Definitely not how the movies make it look. Story 10. I was a cable guy back in the 80s. In our region, there was an apartment complex managed by a Puerto Rican cougar who was rumored to sleep with cable guys. She was the stuff of legend. One day, I got called out to that complex and finally met her. She was a fairly attractive MILF, wearing a flimsy dressing gown as she handed me the keys. I definitely got a come-hither vibe, but I passed. I had a girlfriend my own age and didn't want to mess around with this woman. Fast forward a few weeks, I got a radio call from my coworker, Ed. He used our secret code to gather everyone at a nearby public park, and about 5 of us showed up. He told us he got a BJ from the Puerto Rican cougar. We didn't believe him until he showed us a stain on the inside of his pants. Disgusting. Some of the guys accused him of just getting one off himself instead of actually hooking up with her. But I knew Ed pretty well. He was a tall, handsome guy who had no trouble with women. I believed him. The legend was true. Story 11. I worked in bulk trash pickup for about 5 years. But it wasn't your typical curbside job. We were a private company, so we'd actually go into homes and businesses to haul stuff out. No one ever offered to do it as payment, but I did have plenty of attractive women answer the door wearing next to nothing. One woman in particular had to be a model or some rich guy's trophy wife. She wore the tiniest bikini the entire time we were there, definitely memorable. Other than that, it was mostly uneventful, except for the toys. We'd pick up bags of them now and then, and sometimes they'd switch on when we tossed them into the truck. The sound of them vibrating against the steel truck bed was obnoxiously loud. A lot of embarrassed women on those calls. Story 12. So I, 23F, got out of a rough 3-year relationship a little over a year ago, and it took me a long time to heal. He was the first guy I'd ever been with, and vice versa. and he had me convinced we were going to get married. I mean, he wouldn't shut up about it for the whole 3 years, so of course I believed him. I'm not religious or anything, neither was he, but I've never really been into hookup culture. I always thought I was a one-and-done type of girl. Honestly, I thought I was asexual until I met my ex. I don't know if it was him, me, or both. But our intimate life was intense, 2 to 4 times a day on average, and once we hit 12 times in a single day, so yeah, it turns out I have a pretty high physical drive. That said, I've been really good about not acting on it since the breakup. Even when I go on dates, I've stuck to my boundaries. Lately, I've been really into being spoiled, something my ex never did. I've been enjoying getting treated like a princess. It feels amazing to go out, be pampered, and not have to worry about giving anything in return. I'm always upfront with guys. I tell them I'm not interested in anything physical, not even kissing, and most of them have respected that. I do miss being in a committed relationship, but it's also been really freeing to just enjoy my time without being tied down. I even downloaded Tinder about a month ago and have gone on a few dates with guys I met there. I dress conservatively, and I always make it clear I'm not a one-night stand kind of girl. Now here's where it gets interesting. I matched with this guy who messaged me asking if I wanted to be his foot queen. I joked that I'd only consider it if I were getting paid. One thing led to another, and I somehow agreed to give him a service using just my feet for $250. I'm a broke college student and honestly wanted to experiment a little. Surprisingly, he was super nice and not bad looking at all. The whole thing lasted about 25 minutes, and honestly, it was an intense leg workout. It was kind of nice in the sense that he was so into it, but I didn't feel the same enjoyment. I just zoned out, focused on a game on my phone, and kept my earbuds in. At one point, he asked if I could to add pressure, but when I said I wasn't comfortable with that, he was totally respectful. He even tipped me $50 afterward. All in all, it felt really good to walk away with that kind of extra cash, especially since money's been tight lately. And honestly, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. I even let him know that. Story 13. Used to organize college events, and one year we ran a weekend-long convention at a hotel with about 500 students. As you'd expect, once the sun went down, it quickly turned into a full-blown party weekend. My school had a bit of a reputation as a party campus, so I wasn't too surprised when two girls from a different university knocked on my hotel door late one night. "Hey, we heard your school knows how to party. You got anything?" Not a strange question in itself, but what made it memorable was how hard they were leaning into every movie cliché imaginable. One of them was biting her lip and had her hip popped out like she'd been practicing in the mirror. The other one was doing that exaggerated, "oops, my shirt's unbuttoned" move, making the point to show as much cleavage as possible. It was like they were trying to act out a scene from a teen comedy, but it just came off awkward more than anything. They were clearly a couple years younger than me, so it honestly felt more like their older sibling than anything else. I politely sent them on their way, but I'll never forget how earnestly they were trying to convey, "We're totally DTF" in body language. Also, fun fact, I didn't even have anything to offer. No drugs, no booze, just a half-eaten pizza and a schedule for the next day's workshops. Story 14. This happened years ago when I was delivering food. Now I sup not exactly what you set call a perfect 10, more like a solid does his job and minds his business. So I roll up to this rough neighborhood, nothing out of the ordinary until the door opens. And this girl? Absolute 10, like Instagram model level, standing there all smiles, asking me to come inside. Instantly, every survival instinct I've ever had is screaming in my brain like, "This is a setup, get out now." Because realistically, there were only two ways that could have gone. One, I disappoint her in record time, or two, I walk into some kind of trap and end up as the guy on the local news who got jumped over a delivery. So yeah, I handed her the food, smiled politely, and made the quickest, most professional exit of my life. Not today, temptress. Not today. Story 15. A few years back, I was in a band that had been grinding for a while. You know the type: cramped garage practices, duct-taped gear, playing to crowds of 12 people, most of them drunk friends we bribed with free entry and gas money. We weren't bad. In fact, we had some decent original tracks and a small but loyal following, but breaking into radio rotation, That felt like a pipe dream. We'd sent out demos, emailed local stations, played community events, nothing. Crickets. Then one day we played a Battle of the Bands style showcase. Big turnout, a few local industry folks in the crowd. We didn't win, but we played our best set to date. Afterward, we're packing up and this woman, let's just say she had connections and a lot of influence at one of the mid-sized local stations, comes up to me and starts chatting. Now, I kept not saying there was an official proposal, no contracts, no handshake deals, but the vibe was very much if we got to know each other better, maybe I can pull some strings. It was subtle, professional on the surface, but the subtext was there, and to be honest, I already found her attractive. There was chemistry. This just added a very unexpected layer to the conversation. Long story short, we did get to know each other better, and not long after that, our band's single started getting airtime during the late-night indie spotlight segment. That small window opened doors. We booked better gigs, got invited to some festivals, and best of all, those royalty checks started showing up. Not retire early money, but enough to finally invest in better equipment, studio time, and maybe a few celebratory rounds at the bar. And to be clear, it wasn't just about that. I liked her. We got along, but I won't pretend the professional boost wasn't a nice little bonus track to that whole experience. No regrets. Story 16. This happened a few years ago when I was very single, broke, and living in a tiny apartment above a laundromat that constantly smelled like burnt socks and dryer sheets. One night, I'm scrolling through my dating apps and match with someone who is, frankly, way out of my league. Like, she looked like she had never eaten a cup noodle on a milk crate dining table before, but hey, miracles happen. We start chatting and somehow things escalate quickly. She invites me over that night. Now, two things you need to know about me. One, I'm always down for an adventure. Two, I had zero money at the time, like negative money. So I show up at her place, mentally preparing for either the best night ever or to get robbed for the nothing I owned. She opens the door wearing pajamas and holding a pizza. I'm thinking, this is either a trap or I died and went to heaven. We talk, eat, laugh. She's super chill, then things move to the couch, and then the bedroom. You get the idea. Afterward, I sat lying there feeling like a champion of the broken, slightly average-looking community. That's when she says, by the way, thanks for coming over. I really didn't want to share that pizza with my ex again. I'm like, wait again? Turns out, I was part of an elaborate plan to make her ex jealous. Apparently, he still had the Netflix password and kept showing up with leftover feelings. She wanted to prove she was fully moved on, and I was the perfect guy, cute enough, broke enough to say yes, and too confused to question free pizza. Plot twist? She never told him. Double plot twist. 2 weeks later, I get a text. Hey, my ex saw the snap. He's furious. Want to come over again? Story 17. This happened when I was about 22 and working part-time doing tech support and side gigs fixing home Wi-Fi setups. Basically, I was the neighborhood's unofficial IT guy. So one day, I get a call from a woman in my apartment complex. She says her wife has been acting up and she can't stream anything at all, which to a millennial is basically a cry for help. I swing by her place, and she opens the door in this fluffy robe and says, "You're a lifesaver." Okay, whatever. I'm used to dramatic gratitude when someone's internet starts working again. So I get to work. Turns out her router was in a closet, covered in like 6 coats and a metal lamp. I relocate it, reset it, update the firmware. Boom, we're back in business. YouTube's working, Netflix is thriving, her digital life is restored. Then she says, I don't really have any cash to pay you, but I can offer something else, and starts walking toward me very suggestively. Now this was a curveball. I was broke, but I also had a girlfriend, and more importantly, a healthy fear of this exact situation turning into a Lifetime movie real fast. So I laugh it off, say, honestly, just tell your friends. I'm good with routers, and start backing toward the door like I just defused a bomb and didn't want to jinx it. Then she says, wait, what's your Venmo? Relieved, I give it to her and walk out. About 20 minutes later, I get a notification. He sent me $5 and a pizza emoji. So technically, I was paid in cash and lightly flirtatious emoji innuendo. But hey, beats being offered gratitude and then ending up on a true crime podcast. Story 18. So I used to do handyman gigs while trying to figure out what to do with my life. Fixing doorknobs, leaky sinks, IKEA furniture that had clearly been assembled by blind squirrels, whatever paid the bills. One day, I get a job through a friend to fix a garbage disposal in a swanky apartment complex. I show up and the woman answering the door looks like she just stepped off a reality show. Yoga pants, full glam makeup, talking on the phone in that I'm too rich to carry groceries kind of way. She waves me in like I'm a Roomba, points toward the kitchen, and disappears. I stum elbow deep in the sink when she comes back and leans on the counter watching me. Then, completely out of the blue, she says, "So, do you take alternative forms of payment?" I blink. Hard. I rem thinking, okay, am I in the plot of an extremely unrealistic movie or about to get pepper sprayed for misunderstanding a joke? I laugh nervously and say, you mean like Venmo? She smirks and goes, no, something a little more fun. My brain short circuits. For context, I haven't dated in a while and had been living mostly on leftover ramen and hope. But something about the situation felt off. Like the music would suddenly stop and 10 guys with cameras would jump out yelling, "This was a test of your moral compass." So I go, look, I fam flattered. But if I leave here with no money and an awkward story, my landlord's not going to accept a wink and a smile. She laughs, which I take as a good sign, and says, I was just joking. You passed, respect. She pays me cash, gives me a Gatorade, and I leave. 2 weeks later, the friend who referred me says, oh yeah, she does that to everyone. She's writing a book on how men react to being flirted with while doing manual labor. Story 19. So I used to do tech support for a cable company. Basically, I show up to people's houses and help fix their Wi-Fi, set up routers, or explain for the 100th time that the internet is not broken, your Netflix just needs to update. One afternoon, I go to this lady's place, probably mid-30s, very energetic, super friendly. She's wearing a bathrobe already slightly odd, offers me lemonade odd level 2, and keeps winking at me for literally no reason. I'm thinking, okay, this is it. This is my movie moment. The cable guy fantasy is real. I do my thing, reset the router, fix a dead port, and get her signal back up. She claps. Actually claps and says, oh, you're my hero. Then she touches my arm and says, now what do I owe you? I freeze. My brain is short-circuiting. I stammer something like, it's all included, unless you mean other forms of payment. I try to wink back. It looked more like I had something in my eye. She gives me the most confused look I've ever seen on a human face and goes, oh, I meant like, should I tip you? She pulls out her wallet. Yup. I had just hit her with accidental innuendo. I was the one doing the propositioning. I turned red, mumbled something about company policy, and backed out of there so fast I almost forgot my toolkit. Story 20. So I used to work in a tiny independent coffee shop in a college town. One of those places with exposed brick walls, indie music playing, and baristas who think latte art is a personality trait. I was one of them. One regular, let's call her Tina, was intense. She'd always flirt, leave weirdly large tips in coins like nickels, and once gave me a drawing of myself that she said she sketched while vibing with my energy. It looked like Shrek in an apron, but I digress. One slow afternoon, she comes in and orders a double espresso, leans over the counter, and whispers, so what would it take to get this one for free? I laugh and say, a coupon, thinking she's joking. She leans in closer and says, no coupon, just me. Then she bites her straw in what I think was supposed to be sexy, but looked like she was trying to chew her way out of a Capri Sun. Now, I'm not the most suave guy, but I do know when I'm being propositioned in exchange for caffeine. I panicked. Not because she wasn't attractive, she was cute in a definitely owns tarot cards kind of way, but because my boss was right there in the back and I didn't want to get fired over an espresso-based seduction. So I respond with the only thing my socially awkward brain could come up with. Espresso yourself, somewhere else. She blinked. I blinked. We both stared at each other like a scene from The Office. Then she laughed, called me no fun, paid with exact change in coins again, and left with her coffee. The kicker? A few weeks later, she brought her new boyfriend in, pointed at me, and said, "That's the guy who rejected me for $2.50. Story 21. So I'm a plumber, have been for about 12 years. Nothing glamorous, mostly fixing leaky faucets, unclogging disasters caused by people treating their drains like a trash can, and occasionally rescuing a child's toy from a U-bend like it's Toy Story, plumbing edition. Anyway, a few years back, I get a call for a busted kitchen sink in an upscale neighborhood. I roll up, toolbox in hand, expecting the usual. The woman who answers the door is dressed like she just stepped out of a yoga commercial. You know the type, sipping cucumber water, candle burning in the background, spa music playing like it's a day at the retreat. She leads me into the kitchen and says something like, "I hope you don't mind if I watch, I like to learn." Kinda weird, but hey, maybe she's into DIY. So I start working on the sink while she hovers nearby, asking all these questions like, "So what's the most complicated job you've ever handled?" with this weird soap opera tone in her voice. I tighten a pipe, and she goes, strong hands." At this point I'm thinking, oh no, is this about to turn into one of those cheesy plumber jokes? I try to stay professional. I explain the issue, wrap up the repair, and hand her the invoice. She takes it and goes, "What if I offered a different form of payment?" Cue awkward silence. Now, I am married, happily, so I give her a nervous chuckle and say, "Well, unless you've got a Home Depot gift card, I'm gonna need a signature and a check." She laughs, says she was just joking, though I'm 99% sure she wasn't, and pays up. But the kicker? As I'm packing up, her husband walks in, holding 2 smoothies, and says, "Hey babe, I got the post-spin class smoothies," and he winks at me. I still don't know if that wink meant, "Thanks for fixing the sink," or "You could sif joined us." Either way, I left with a story and a solid tip. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.